5 years after instituting a legal action against American investment bank JP Morgan Chase, the Nigerian government has lost the case. The suit failed to prove that a fraud had been perpetrated against Nigeria by the bank. And the Rice correspondent Oyin Sunday here situates the story.
The year is 1998, and Dan Etete is Nigeria's oil and gas minister. He awarded oil block OPL 245 to a company called Malibu Oil, a company he controls. After the return to democracy, Etete's rights to the field was challenged until a deal was reached, which led to the sale of the block to Shell and ENI in 2011. The deal involved the payment of $1.3 billion by Shell and ENI to the Nigerian government for the oil block. $875 million of that money was, however, paid to Dan Etete's Malibu Oil and Gas Company under orders of the Nigerian government. Half of that was allegedly packed into bags and paid out to Nigerian government officials and Western oil executives as cash bribes. A court in Milan would later acquit the companies and executives of wrongdoing after a lawsuit ensued. But in 2017, Nigeria instituted a legal action against American banking and financial service group JP Morgan Chase, claiming over $1.7 billion in damages over its role in the disputed 2011 Malibu oil deal. Nigeria alleged JP Morgan was grossly negligent in its transfer of funds paid by the energy majors to a company linked to the former oil minister Dan Etete, following instructions received from Nigerian government officials. But Nigeria says those officials were party to a fraudulent scheme and sought compensation, including cash sent to Etete's Malibu Oil and Gas Company, paid in 3 installments in 2011 and 2013, plus interest, bringing the total to over $1.7 billion. But in a 137-page ruling on Tuesday at London's High Court, Judge Sarah Cockerill dismissed the claim, ruling that Nigeria had fallen at the first hurdle because there was no evidence of fraud had been perpetrated against Nigeria. The Nigerian government says it will review the judgment carefully before considering next steps.
Arise business analyst Bode Ososami has been following the story, which was first broken by an NGO, Global Watch, in 2012. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsnight, Bode. Let me start off by asking, why do you think this case went this way in favor of JP Morgan?
Well, you have to look at the role federal government and, of course, various governments have played, and how, of course, the courts in the UK would be a bit mystified in terms of how this is all going. Actually, it was 2 middlemen hired by Malibu, one Nigerian, one Azerbaijani, then that sued the firm separately in London in the High Court and in an arbitration tribunal, claiming unpaid fees, essentially his share of the loot. And an NGO called Global Watch broke the story to all. Clearly, there was fraud at monumental proportions. The case just shows how multinationals, corrupt government leaders, middlemen, big banks, and weak institutions collaborate in ill-governed countries to dupe countries of billions. This was a field, I understand it has as much as 9 billion barrels of oil worth almost $1 trillion. It was awarded to Malibu, this company that was set up a few days before with no employees or assets, for a signature bonus of $20 million, of which Malibu only ever paid $2 million. The government has been trying, and the case has been going on and on, especially of recent. And I think the fact that they hadn't been able to make progress, JP Morgan seemed to be a scapegoat that they thought they could go after. But JP Morgan's defense is quite strong. They said they acted according to their agreed mandate, and they're not in a position to act as the institution or the police to protect funds from being improperly used, especially when everything was properly approved at the highest level of government. And the judge had to agree that JP Morgan acted as instructed by the mandated authorized persons. The other thing is that the length of time that has passed, the very official nature of the corruption, is very difficult to find compelling witnesses to come forward, especially as the beneficiaries of this dubious deal remain very prominent in society and are protected. So the only way to tackle this is for a government that is ready to open the Pandora's box and go fearlessly after all those involved, rather than just single out JP Morgan as a scapegoat.
But you're right, this is stretched through one military regime, 3 presidents, and this current administration, and it's still not solved. But let's look at the ground cited by Nigeria, that the bank should have seen enough notice of risk. Does Nigeria have a case, and should it appeal?
Well, it depends on the evidence that it has to present. My understanding is that there was a shortage of evidence, shortage of witnesses, and the important question is, can Nigeria produce all the required evidence without hurting the sacred cows involved in the deal? I think that's just a simple question, and Nigeria should not give up. This crime took place 24 years ago, was exposed in 2012, 10 years ago, by an NGO, not by the government, and for years the government tried to cover up this deal until recent, when they had to admit that fraud was actually taking place. Giving up is saying that it is right to loot a developing country of billions, where we have 100 million people in the grip of poverty with paltry electricity and almost no welfare support. And I think any sincere government should continue to push the case. I wanted to talk about Malaysian government, what they did in the 1MDB fraud case against Credit Suisse. The time lapse was less. The government was more serious. They initiated the action. And in the end, Credit Suisse was severely fined and admitted to falling short of its high standards and promised to ensure that they did the right thing. But in this Nigerian case, I think the bank is certain that Nigeria is not going to be able to pursue this with all the evidence that is required to expose JP Morgan.
Let's talk about, lessons learned from this. According to the former Attorney General of the Federation, Adoke, of course, who was involved at that time, he says there is no case to pursue. But then it's happened, like you said, 24 years ago. How far Nigeria hopes to pursue this is unknown. But then what are the lessons learned here? How do we, ensure that a recurrence doesn't take place?
I'm shocked that the former Attorney General can have the courage to actually say there is no case. That just tells you the complicity that we're talking about here. I believe in strong institutions, not personalities, and strong institutions that are led by trusted individuals that can challenge even the head of state if necessary. That's what happens in every civilized part of the world. Here in Boris Johnson is being taken up by people routinely. So it's not about sycophants and praise singers who want to keep their jobs at all costs. The important controls and checks and balances have to be there, and they have to be more than adequate. And if the institutions are strong, if they are transparent and digitized, there's less room for corruption. Everybody loses when corruption thrives, because it becomes a culture. The leakages to the economy eventually become unbearable, and we have inevitable fiscal stress. So I think it's not about appointments and strong men and who gets what job. We have to look at these processes. We have to ensure that the legal and policing and enforcement institutions are strengthened. You can't expect European legal institutions to do our work for us. It just doesn't work that way. And a lot of work needs to be done in this space in building our institutions to get them right, in my view.
Indeed. Strong institutions and not strong men. Thank you so much, Bode Ososami, Arise Business News Analyst.